Ben Jones, I'm the Chief Technical Officer for AKQA. I'm here today to talk to you about how data is driving growth, and if harnessed properly, it truly is the future of advertising. It's said that if you harness data properly, it's going to drive simplification of user interfaces, better, deeper relationships with consumers, and ultimately increase operating margins. McKinsey said it was going to increase operating margins by up to 60%, which is vast amounts. But first, I want to talk about a children's book series called The Mr. Men. So it's a bit random, but it's about the future of the consumer. I actually want to talk about this little character called Mr. Messy. He's one of many characters: Mr. Happy, Mr. Bump, Mr. Tickle. Mr. Messy is relevant to my son, Jacob. He's 5 years old. He loves the Mr. Men. And I was sitting behind him while he was watching the Mr. Men on TV. And I said, Jacob, who's your favorite Mr. Man? And he said, well, Daddy, it's Mr. Messy. And I said, well, why, Jacob? And he said, because Mr. Messy's just like me. He leaves mess everywhere, which he does. And I'm constantly picking it up. And it actually struck me that, in actual fact, this is the true view of the consumer this day and age. In the digital age, it's exactly what they do. It's channel me. They are the ones not giving the data to the brands anymore, signing up to your solutions and your websites or your mobile solutions. They are doing something. They're giving data, but they're giving it absolutely everywhere else but other than the brands. They're putting it in Facebook, Instagram. They put it in their car. They put it in Nike Fuel Band. They put it wherever it is, but they're very rarely giving it to the brand these days. But they're giving it. Ooh. So before I move on, we had the opportunity to record people like Jack Dorsey and other various kind of leaders in the industry, future thinkers. And we asked them a question around data and what it really means and why it's going to be so relevant in the future.
Our suspicion is that the younger users will always be as open. The concept of privacy is learned behavior. Those teenage years and technology will be their formative experiences. The greater percentage of them will always be comfortable sharing the amount of information they're currently sharing online.
Privacy is interesting because it's not really something you can choose to have. It's something that you might have.
How we will deal with the fact that our entire lives will gradually be recorded, whether it's on the street, whether it's through our friends' cell phones, our own cell phones.
If you would have asked the same question back in 2000 about sharing your own personal photos online, like that was a scary thing. Like, I don't want a photo of me and my dad online. Like, that's just really weird, you know? But now it's like just commonplace. Anytime you expose data that people aren't expecting you to expose, it's kind of like a little freaky for a little while, but then people actually understood that there's actually, you know, a value add there.
People will gradually learn to give away more and more and more about who they are because corporations will make it valuable to them.
I mean, privacy is one of those norms that people are expecting online, even though it hasn't really existed online for quite some time. I think it's important for companies to be the good guys in this and make it clear that yes, we want a lot of information, but we'll let you choose to not give us that information if you want.
So the consumers change, the world of data is changing, and it's changing so rapidly that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. And that's coming from a company like IBM, who know data really well. So if you haven't started already to collate this data from around the consumer, where they're leaving it, you've still got time. Imagine what you could collate in a month, 2 months. So how big is big data? Everyone's talking about it. Well, 3.6 zettabytes in the USA alone in 1 day. What's that? It means nothing to me, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer. It's about 5.1 million hard drives stacked up in a room collating this data. It's huge. 50 million tweets a day. And if you took just Instagram alone, 10 billion photos on an emerging platform already uploaded. It's huge. But what's more important about that is the unstructured data. The information, the comments on those photos, of which there are over 100 comments per second on all the photos going around. Sentiment, valuable data in there. So I'm going to give you 6 steps to harness big data. Step 1 is recognizing and listening that you've got to change. recognizing that potentially the data that you have around the consumer already within your enterprises, in your CRM database, is not really relevant. It's not really what they're saying. It's recognizing that you have to listen properly to the data, because the truth is, truths hurt. They might not like your service line, they may not like your brand, but if you're truly listening to the data, you can get words like this. This is just a quote from Wikipedia, and it's about active listening. And imagine if you were harnessing data and listening to the consumers properly and changing your service lines, adapting the product lines, and they were saying that you were sincere, you were personal, you're proactive, and you're accountable. Huge gains just in brand awareness. A great example of that is Target. Target wanted to target this particular consumer. They recognized that loyalty had gone from the marketplace, especially Target are a huge supermarket in the States. And they said, and the CEO went to a chap called Andrew Pohl, who's in the analytics team and the data team. And he said, Andrew, we need to change. We need to harness. We need to drive customer loyalty back up. We need to increase revenue because it's dropping. And he said, what can we do? In supermarket, in retailing with a supermarket, the key thing is life changes. People who have gone to university, people who are getting pregnant. And so the ultimate holy grail is to get the pregnant woman as young as you possibly can. Not get a pregnant woman young as possibly can. That's bad. And that wasn't part of the script. They focused on the fact that they got the trends of the data in the birth registry, the trends, cross-reference that with all the data they had around customer basket acquisitions and so forth, whatever was going, all the sales data, and they found three key things. They found cotton wool balls. Interesting. Everyone buys cotton wool, but not in the quantities that a pregnant woman's going to buy, because they have to use them for the baby. They recognized that lotion was going into basket predominantly. Everyone buys lotion, but it was unscented lotion in high quantities. And they also found that magnesium, calcium, and zinc supplements were going into basket. They knew that they could identify a pregnant woman even before her father knew that she was pregnant, which is bad. And that's exactly what happened. It absolutely kicked off. They had loads of different upsell, cross-sell on their website. And this particular girl hadn't told her father at the time, and her father went absolutely mad towards Target, and he made this huge complaint. And then 2 weeks later, she said to her father, in actual fact, I am pregnant. What did he do? He built a guest ID. He focused on all the data they had within the enterprise. This is going back literally 4 years, and built the whole guest ID. And every single part of the piece, every single new source of data was added into the guest ID. And it continues to grow with social feeds and so forth. Step 2 is capture and organize. It's recognizing that it's about, yes, it's the internal sources of data, but there's a vast amount of external sources of data as well, which are more relevant to you, more relevant to the consumer. Because the consumer that you have in your CRM database isn't the true voice of the consumer. It's this. It's sensors like Fuel Band. It's the Open Graph. It's Facebook. It's Instagram. And social's only one part of this. It's what they're doing in their car, how many apps they've got on their devices. You've got to build the myriad of around the consumer, a true view of the consumer to really understand them. How do you do it? Well, it's becoming friends with people like me, unfortunately. Not me exactly, that would be great, but it's more that becoming friends with IT. That's the true partnership, a partnership with IT. And you've got to ask them the question, things like, have we got Hadoop in the enterprise? Which is a technology which is able to process this vast amount of data in real time. They've got to be honest and look at their existing infrastructure in terms of how they get this data and recognize that it's not going to process it in real time, because you've got to process this data in real time to be able to affect change quicker than your competitors. But it's vast. They've got to harness the cloud, and infrastructure in the cloud can scale up quicker than they can actually buy machines into their server rooms. It's about rethinking the enterprise data integration strategy massively, but it's working together to do that. So step one is to define the view of the consumer together. So identifying those internal data sources of which you have already. But the truth is, like I said, if it's growing by 90% in 2 years, then maybe the level of effort it's going to take to integrate some of the sources of data you already have with the enterprise, it may just be too cost prohibitive. It might be worth starting again. And that's pretty radical. But if it's growing by 90% in over 2 years, it's worth looking at. It's identifying those key external data sources. It may be a car and the telemetrics coming out of the car. It's location-based information. It's definitely social. It's evaluating these big data technologies, like I said, Cassandra, Hadoop, MapReduce, the cloud, and really understanding how you define the extract, transform, and load architectures. Again, a thing that IT should really be focusing on to be fit for future. Because if you're not doing it now, you won't exist tomorrow. And then it's about visualizations, algorithms, of which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and ultimately developing the right dashboard, which is consumable and actionable, which I'll talk about in 2 seconds. Analyze and visualize is the next one. Because at the end of the day, you've got to make that data into information. Otherwise, it's just noise. And it's ultimately about applying the relevant algorithms to really drive relevancy to the consumer. Truly garnering the insights and then developing a relevant conversation, relevant content, relevant product and service lines, whatever it is, but it's all about relevancy. And that's through algorithms, developing algorithms and IP in your own algorithms. How do you do it? Well, it's about building the right team. These people don't really exist. In actual fact, there's no course, like I went to years ago to go and learn computer studies as a degree. There's no course to really understand how to identify and work with big data sets like big data is these days. So where do you find them? Well, luckily, there is a course being put together with Bank of America and Cisco, McKinsey, building a curriculum for the new future of the data statistician course. But you've got to find these people. They do exist in part, but McKinsey stated that there was over 200,000 opportunities and open roles coming into next 2013 to really find these people. And you've got to bring them into the organization and love them, like the CEO of Target did with Andrew Pohl. It's about visualizing this data properly. It's got to be real-time dashboards, not Excel. It's got to be truly actionable. Because all marketing managers these days are so busy and overwhelmed with work, it's got to be actionable and consumable really simply. We did something for Xbox, which is as simple as this. A real-time live dashboard, which allowed the marketing manager of EMEA to understand where to spend his money. He was sending Excel spreadsheets to all his local marketing managers, and they were requesting various different changes on Xbox.com, saying, we need to do this, we need to do this, all random and sporadic. And they weren't looking at the data because it wasn't consumable, it was in Excel. As soon as we developed this dashboard for him, they were making the right decisions because it was easy to understand. Step 4 is experiment and educate. It's important to not start with big data in one big go because you won't succeed. It's about starting with a single data stream, choosing one additional one, working with it, experimenting, thinking about that single data stream, and then what I would say, tinkering. And so you think and you tinker, and that's how I got the word thinker. That's bad, I know. But it's about taking that data stream, adapting, optimizing, tweaking all the way through a particular project and understanding how that data works for you. There's one thing we did was, for Nike called Make It Count, a very successful social campaign. But it wasn't really just about social. It was about how they truly harness Twitter as an additional data stream around their consumer to really understand them, how they work, what they say, can they get two-way conversations. So instead of me talking about it, I'll show you this film which talks about the Make It Count campaign, just sets it up, and then I'll tell what they got out of it.
Every new year we resolve to be healthier, fitter, better, and put all our friends on standby to witness this spectacular revolution of me. But 2012 is no typical year. 2012 is the Olympics. 2012 is the European Championships. 2012 is a stack of world records and personal records just waiting to be smashed. and a community of 25 million fighters, dreamers and believers were already out there, ready for the challenge, listening for the starter's gun. On New Year's, 87 of the world's greatest athletes put it on the line with the pledge to all their followers on Twitter. And let's do the math on that. Durant's got 1 million, Serena has 2, Lance has 3, and Cristiano has 6 million followers hanging on each of those 140 characters or less. They were all asking one question: how do you make it count in 2012?
So what did we do? Well, chose Twitter. We set up a command center. We gave them rules, regulations, processes to follow. This whole team of 60-odd people to listen to the Twitter streams coming through from all these different people, to give them an ability to be able to respond in real time with their own voice within these regulations and rules and processes we gave them. We gave them a solution, a system, which was set up in a certain way and put in various different tweets in different places. And some of it was automated response, some of it wasn't. Some of it was personal. We reached 452 million people, which is great. It was amazing. It was phenomenal. It wasn't about that. It was actually about the insights we got from the data. It was the fact that we knew that we could make two-way conversations work. Great, phenomenal opportunity. That was new for Nike. We also realized that we gave them these processes in terms of ability to respond with our own personal voice, but that's not what worked. So constantly listening and tweaking the system and the processes of which we were doing on an hourly basis, telling the teams of how the system had changed and how they could change and how their rules and processes had changed, they could actually start to be much more inspirational because they were being too personal and it wasn't working. Constantly tweaking and changing. We found out, ironically, that sometimes that 2 million number of the followers that Serena has, 2 million followers, in actual fact, the person who had more engagement was Jacob Yelsbury, an unknown baseball player to me, probably pretty big in the States. He had a smaller audience, but much better engagement. We know engagement rules. So maybe it gives them an understanding about return on investment, where to put their money through sponsorship. There's lots of other factors, obviously. Serena Williams has been exceptionally successful this year. But it gives them another insight about how they spend their money. We were working on Instagram, but only in a small part. But it gave us an opportunity to understand that the emerging channel of Instagram was much more engaging for the consumers. That's where they were. So future marketing spend is going to go through Instagram. Step 5 is to adapt and simplify. Adapt your service lines, adapt your teams, adapt the organization to be able to sit and understand data and work with it. A great example is Fiat for us. We recognize in everything we do for Fiat, it's got to have a feedback loop from the applications we develop, whatever it may be. And it informs the future. And if you took the Fiat car configurator, which we built a long time ago now, we built in an understanding, we got from that, from the feedback loop and the data coming back, that the way the manufacturing process works in Turin, they assume they predict the type of cars that are going to be required by the consumers. And that's expensive because they have all those car lots, vast amounts of car lots, and lots of cars in those car lots, all in white maybe, all 1.2 engines, because they think that's what's going to sell. In actual fact, from the insights we were gaining from the data coming from that particular feed, that wasn't the case. The showrooms were telling them one thing, but online it was telling them a very different thing. We gave the information back to the manufacturing process, to the manufacturing plants, and they started to build 1.4 cars instead. 1.4 with certain wheels and was actually in white as well. We took that a step further, and we built EcoDrive, which is a telemetric solution. Now, we take all the data out of a car. We help people to drive better through understanding what they're doing with how they drive. Are they driving quickly? Are they pressing the clutch too soon? Are they turning? Are they accelerating stupidly? Are they braking too hard? And with EcoDrive, we have the opportunity to then cross-reference that against the service data so that we can drive better production of components within the cars. Because it may be the clutch is breaking, but why? Is it because the clutch and the heart, the actual manufacturing process of the clutch is poor and bad? Or is it the fact that we cross-reference it? And do you know what? People don't use the clutch very well at all. So maybe we need to manufacture the clutch in a very, very different way. Who would expect that a website and an application like that would actually inform the manufacturing process of components. But if they do, the benefit is that it builds better, robust cars, which is going to drive the intent to repurchase higher. It's about changing organization, like I said, business adaptation through data, access, and empowerment. A great example of that is Google. Everyone knows about the 20% rule, yes, about the fact that they innovate and they have 20% to play around. But ultimately, that's not what it is. What they've done is they give access to the whole workforce, these 32,000 permanent employees. They give access to the data, and they empower them by making them much smaller teams, much more modular, and give them the chance to self-govern, make decisions through this 20% time, so they can actually get access to the data, garner the insights, and innovate on top of that. And that's why Google are a huge innovator, and yet they're 32,000 big. It's focused on algorithms and automation, not manual site updates. Again, you take someone like Amazon. Their focus isn't about building a manual team, a team of people updating their site manually. Everyone knows it's all focused on developing the algorithms, which are going to change and adapt in real time their own website. It's constant real-time testing at every single level through the whole of the stack, even their hardware from Amazon EC2 services. Predictive analytics is where we get to, and it's ultimately about don't make me choose as a consumer, choose for me. Imagine if we can get to that. There's a great talk by a chap called Barry Schwartz on TED. Watch it. It's absolutely fantastic. But he talks about how the modern-day consumer is constantly paralyzed to choice, and to the point where they have so much choice, and they're the best researchers, that they don't make the choice. So simplify the experience, simplify the products you show them, and choose for them. For example, if you took my open graph, and this is quite rudimentary, so bear with me. You took my open graph, you'd recognize that I'm from Surrey in England, which is quite leafy, quite urban. I've got 2 children. All the clothes that I wear in the photos, which I'm tagged in, are quite often dark colors and black. Okay, bear with me, quite rudimentary. I listen to Spotify all the time. And ultimately, I was from Essex, a quite chavvy place in England. And so, why would you show me a Volkswagen Fox when I come to Volkswagen.com? Why wouldn't you show me a 4x4, because everyone has a 4x4 in Surrey, black, massive wheels, and a good stereo? Choose for the consumer. That's what data can give us if we harness it properly. Step 6 is quite simple. It's just closing the loop. Never forgetting that traditional data needs to feed into the big data model. Footfall, brand index, things like that. Making sure that this closing the loop. Making sure that once you've connected with the consumer with the Volkswagen Touareg, maybe don't show them again because you've already connected with them. Show them something new. It's got to be circular. So in conclusion, it's quite simple. Be completely customer data obsessed. Everyone in the organization needs to be completely customer data obsessed. Finding data, new sources of data, speaking with IT, invest in the algorithms. That's where the future is going to be. Automation, cleverness within that. Changing the business, flatten the organization, making it more modular, making it more flexible. Give them access to data that you're harnessing. Don't hide it away. Because when you give someone access to data, they may have an idea. They'll garner a different insight. Change it by data statisticians, people like that. It's ultimately going to drive relevancy through simplification of user interfaces. That's where we need to get to. Less is more. And there's nothing truer than Leonardo da Vinci. I don't know how he knew this, it was a long time ago. But simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Because in a world where we are right now, the way to harness the future of the consumer is by harnessing big data, the fastest growing thing on the planet. It's complex, but if you harness it properly, it's going to drive complete simplicity. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Now, before you all go to lunch, I'd like to ask a question. Perhaps people from the audience have a question for you also, Ben. I mean, what does it say about me that I didn't know about Hadoop and Cassandra? I know that I'm not pregnant, but what does it say about me that I haven't heard those terms before?
Are you a marketeer? Are you an IT person?
I'm a marketeer.
I wouldn't expect anyone from marketing to truly understand what Hadoop needs to be. You don't need to understand technology, but again, it's the partnership between you and I if we worked in the same organization. And that's the thing, quite often organizations are separated with IT sitting over here and marketing sitting over there, and quite often they say they're together, and they're not. And so it's about having that conversation saying, I heard this word Hadoop.
Right.
What does it mean for us?
And this data statistician, is he in marketing or is he in IT?
Should be in marketing.
It should be in marketing,
100%
right?
in marketing.
So is there an agency right now that you would call the McKinsey of the digital world?
AKQA, obviously.
Okay.
I don't know. I think everyone's learning and has to learn very rapidly in this space. There's no doubt about that. And every agency should be moving into the space of big data and bringing in data statisticians exactly like we are and McKinsey's do.
Right. So if you have more questions for Ben, he's going to the domes, the igloos, just around the corner. You can ask him questions in real person. You can even tap him on the shoulder for his great presentation. Ben, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right.